My name is Monk Rowe, and I'm off camera, but I'm very pleased to have Nicki Parrott here as a guest for the Hamilton College Jazz Archive. Welcome back to Utica.
Thank you. Always good to be here.
It's interesting, we talked, well, you were here a few weeks ago,
Yeah.
and you mentioned that you were coming back and playing klezmer music.
Yes.
I got the impression you weren't really sure what you were going to be doing or who was playing, and is that a sort of a typical situation that you find yourself in?
Sometimes you get band leaders that will tell you every single detail, almost too much detail, and then you get the complete opposite where you're not sure what time the gig is, where the gig is, if you'll eat, if you'll
Yeah.
where the hotel is. Sometimes you're in the dark. But I've worked with David Krakauer, the artist tonight, for the last on and off for the last 10 years.
Okay.
Mostly in Europe because he's actually a big star in France. And he had a French record label and he put out a lot of records in France. So I've toured a lot in Europe with him, and he's one of the best clarinetists I've worked with.
Is the music like more popular over there? This
Yes.
kind of music?
Yes. He does his version of klezmer music.
Mm-hmm.
So he mixes it with jazz, with funk, whatever. He did a wonderful album a long time ago, which was a tribute to Sidney Bechet.
Oh.
So it was his version of blending klezmer with that early Sidney Bechet kind of music and join them together. And he came up. It's very interesting. He's a very interesting artist. So he does a sort of a mix of like traditional klezmer, which you might even hear at a bar mitzvah or a Jewish wedding or something, you know, and mixed with he's an extraordinary classical musician. So he mixes some of that with some jazz, some funk, and and it comes out, so some of it's traditional and some of it's like this, soup.
And you've got
It's
to
fun.
find your place in that music.
Yeah.
Which I think is a big part of being a musician, especially a bass player. You've got to like figure out what's the situation here. How do you gain that musical knowledge?
Well, it's funny, there are different ways to lead a band, and now that I'm a band leader myself a lot, I'm learning how to do it and get the results and get the respect and everything. And there are some people like when I was up here last time, I worked with Dick Hyman here, and I also worked with Dick Hyman earlier in the year at Marion's. And as someone like Dick doesn't really want to tell you how to play, but might give you a guideline. You know what I mean? Like, well, I think you sing that song better, or just just come in after a couple of choruses, and that's like you get a little bit of a guideline, but he'll never tell you actually how to play the gig. And so I think you just got to use your best judgment. You know what I mean? But you have to wear the hat of the gig. I always tell students that you have to, unless you're leading, it's like you don't play bass solos behind the clarinet solo, or you don't do that. You play what the gig requires, which for me is a groove, is time, is a feel, is sound, and I love accompanying. So I'm always finding out, well, if the drummer's getting really busy, I might play simple. If it's getting exciting, well, I might rhythmically push too, you know what I mean? Like, so you have to kind of just keep your wits about it. But I think the thing about being a bass player is you really like the glue. So if it's all going crazy around you, you've got to be like the center and like, I'm not going to let this slow down or go out the window, or you've really got to keep your center and just try to make all of that work somehow. Sometimes it does, sometimes not so well.
That's great advice. I've often felt that the bass player really is really the linchpin of the whole thing. I mean, you can send the music in a direction if you want to. I mean, if you want to start swinging and the rest of the band's playing in two, you can sort of like say, no, we're going this way.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of power, it seems to me.
It is, and sometimes you play with you know, if I'm at a gig, say, and I remember just being on a gig once with Jeff Hamilton out of California, a wonderful drummer. Now, when I was playing with Jeff, and we hadn't played together before, I'm going to let Jeff lead even though he may not be leading the set, you know what I mean, but we're in a trio or a quartet, and someone's up front playing, I forget who it was at the time. But my eyes were on Jeff. Whatever Jeff does, I'm going to... So I noticed when he was in two, when he was, you know what I mean, I just tried to follow his lead. Some drummers are really good at leading, and you can just follow along. And other times you feel like you know what I mean, you can take more of it. It's really a communication. I like communication between bass players and drummers. It makes the music that much more tighter.
Is there such a thing as playing, you hear the term, playing on top of the beat,
Yeah.
or behind the beat? Is that a reality?
Well, I think about that less and less. I thought about it when I was younger, and when I had a lesson with Ray Brown, who was known for playing on top of the beat, so to speak. Well, other musicians would say he played really on top of the beat. When I asked Ray about it, Ray was like, well, he says, I like to give the music an edge, but I don't like it to get too fast, but I like it to have an edge. So he liked to really propel the beat, I think, you know what I mean? Whether you call that top of the beat or whatever. And, you know, I don't like to think about it, because I think what happens is when you're a freelancer, and these days there are few bands where you're playing with the same person all the time, you know. So if you're a freelancer, you're going to get some drummers that really kind of play very laid back, which gives you a little more authority to play, you know. The two things, you just don't want it to speed and you don't want it to slow down. So you have to kind of find, you know, if the drummer plays so far back, well then you've got to really push the beat, you know what I mean? Because otherwise it's going to drag.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If the drummer's rushing, and I find it harder to play with a rushing drummer, and I have to think about this when I'm booking my own gigs. You know what I mean? If I'm trying to play and now I'm singing more, you know, I don't want a drummer that's like pushing the beat too much, because I'm trying to no, just keep it there, you know. And so that's even harder, because you really got to put the anchor on their beat, and that takes a lot of concentration too. So it really depends who you're playing with, this on top of the beat, behind the beat. The main thing is the horn player wants you to keep it at the tempo it was counted off at, or somewhere in there, because they've got to play the head on the way in, and they've got to play the head on the way out. If it gets too fast for them to play the head out, they're not exactly happy with the rhythm section then, are they? You know? So it's really like, for me, it's about a responsibility of keeping the time within a reasonable, you know,
Yeah.
where it's counted off. Sorry, I'm not explaining it very well.
No, you
know what I
are.
mean?
Very well.
You know, if it's counted there, it's your job as a bass player to keep it around there, you know. And I find that the best musicians really do that, you know what I mean? And so that's why you don't even think about it when you're with great drummers and great piano players, and it just flows, because everyone knows what the beat is, and it's just, I had one of those nights the other night. You know, I played with a drummer for the first time, and you know, it's just so nice when you hear the beat exactly the same place. And he was trying all kinds of stuff on the drums. Alvin Atkinson, wonderful. He was just going for it, you know. And the gig had this lovely looseness, so it was like, yeah, just go for it. But it was always, when we came back in to play, it was always just there.
Well, when you book your own gigs and you're as a leader, I'm curious about your phone book or whatever. Do you have indicators of?
No.
But you probably have people that you want to call in a certain order.
And sometimes for me, it's about the gig, you know. Sometimes I think it might be a gig where they want it more traditional. So sometimes I might hire Rossano Sportiello over John DiMartino, or, you know what I mean? It depends musically what they want sometimes too.
Sure.
But it's, you know, I kind of have a pool of musicians I try to get, you know, basically.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned amongst the things that you think about when you play, you think about sound. Is there a way that you can, as a bass player, how do you distinguish your own bass playing from any
That's a
other
really hard
100?
thing.
Pardon?
Yeah, that's a very hard thing. I think it's hard on any instrument these days, you know, with all the influences out there. You know, you gotta steal from the best. You know, you do. We all do. You know, we've all had, you know, listen, I worked for Les Paul for quite a while, you know, and sometimes I go back and listen to old Les Paul, I'm like, wow, that's like Charlie Christian.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? Like some of the really early stuff, a little bit of Django in there, perhaps, and other people that he was listening to at the time that were around, you know.
Mhm.
And myself, you know, the first bass player I fell in love with, Paul Chambers. Now when I play the bass, I still love the way Paul Chambers, Oscar Pettiford play the bass. So that's still kind of, even if it's way unconscious, it's still a part of like what I like about bass playing with those guys. And then of course Ray Brown, and I listen to Ron Carter, I listen to Milt Hinton a lot, you know, and Bobby Hager. I got to meet him a couple of times before. You know, I sort of came to New York as I think he died a year later or something like that. But so it's very hard. Your own sound. You just, you know what I mean. You have a sound that you want to go for, and then now, because you can't really travel with a bass that much these days with the airlines the way they are. So I like the challenge of trying to get a good sound, or trying to get my sound out of all these different instruments you come up with.
Wow.
Sometimes you even get a bass that's better than you. I was in Switzerland a few weeks back. I got a bass that's way better than my one at home. So that gives you another perspective. It's like, wow, if I had a bass set up like this, I could play this, or I could do that, or, you know.
Yeah, I think saxophone and trumpet players forget about that situation, you know. Like
Yeah.
if you were going to fly to a gig and, okay, here's your saxophone.
Yes.
It's like, oh, I can't play that, or that's tricky.
Well, with bass, you have a lot of variables. You have ones set up for symphony orchestras, ones that haven't been played in 50 years, and ones that are really not set up for jazz. Sometimes they got a pickup for a hookup, sometimes they don't. You know, sometimes there's so much dust on them, and it's crazy that the variables in piano players complain about it, you know, but piano variables are really in here. Bass variables. Drums too. Drums can get pretty wide in the sort of sound, you know, if you've got rock drums. I'll set up a rock drum for you, and it's a little tiny jazz gig, you know.
Well, let me see if I can get a sense of when you were 12 or 13 in Australia, right?
Yeah.
Did you have visions of doing what you're doing now? Did you have aspirations at that age?
You know, all I know that for me it was sports and music growing up. You know, my dad was quite an athlete, you know, and actually my dad was a big influence. In fact, I'm taking my dad on a jazz cruise next month. So he's coming to New York, and we're going on the Arbors Jazz Cruise.
Oh, right.
Down in Florida, and he loves it. But, you know, he's funny, you know. But when I was growing up, it was athletics and music. And for me, a turning point, it was funny you say 12 or 13, because I think I was around that age. Perhaps 13 or 14. But I went down, and I was playing classical piano and classical flute. And school bands, local bands. I was in a band when I was 13 called the Marching Koalas. And I played piccolo and marched in the Rose Parade in Pasadena, playing piccolo. The Marching Koalas, no kidding. So I was involved in a lot of musical things, but then I also had this thing where I was into sprinting. I was a sprinter. You know, so I was going to like a state championship in like 100 meter, 200, 400 and hurdles and the relay and all that stuff. So I was in few events. And I just remember one time when I realized that I'd have to work really hard to get to that next level of being an athlete. Do you know what I mean? It sort of dawned on me because I I'd been winning all these without too much training and without, you know what I mean? Like I'd sit skating on a little natural time. My dad would train me down the park, and that was sort of good enough. And you know, so I hit this point when I was like 14, and I was in the state championships, and I had gotten like 4th place in the heat or something. I'm like, oh wow, okay. And then I made the final or something, but I either went to the final of this race, or I went to a piano theory exam. They clashed, the times clashed. And I was in Sydney with my dad, and Dad said, what do you want to do? I said, I'm going to the theory exam. Either I didn't want to humiliate myself in case I come last, or it sort of dawned on me, this athletics thing is, if I really want to pursue that seriously, that's going to be a lot harder work than playing music, you know. And music was always much more a part of me at that stage. Do you know what I mean? From 5 years old, going to piano lessons, and then school band and the flute. I mean, it was really the thread through my whole early years and high school. So I knew I wanted to be a musician. Where? I don't know. I didn't even know New York existed back then, really. I mean, I'm on the other side of the world. I'm close to Sydney. Sydney I was drawn to. So I was drawn to big cities. And really it was 6 years in Sydney that I decided, after 6 years in Sydney, that I decided to come to New York, because when I was in Sydney, I started hearing about New York. When I was in Newcastle, all I heard about was Sydney, as far as music goes. Do you know what I mean? So when I got to Sydney and they started talking about New York, I'm like, well, maybe I should check out New York.
And your sister was sort of preceding you in this musical endeavor?
Yes, she also played piano and clarinet and tenor sax, and she got some records when, I don't know, she might, around then, about, I was 14, she was 16, something like that. And she came home with all these records, Charlie Parker, Louis Armstrong, everybody, you know, just, all, you know, I don't know how she got half these records, but she came home with all these records. And then then she formed a band. Right, you probably know this story.
Not sure.
Yeah, she formed a band, and she said, I don't need a flute player in my band. And I was like, I looked up to her so much back then. I still do, you know. She's really always been a good musician, my sister. You know what I mean? She's always had her own mind, her own sound, her own voice from a young age. I really feel that about her. She's just followed her own vision musically throughout her life. Very interesting. And so I was like, okay. But there was a bass at school. She said, if you want to be in my band, I need a bass player. So lo and behold, there was a bass at school. And a guy across the road that kind of played bass in a Dixieland band in Newcastle with 3 strings. Didn't even have 4 strings on it. He says, no one hears the bottom string, don't worry about it. Just 3 strings are enough. And I'm like, wow, this is weird.
That's funny.
Yeah. So, you know, sort of set up a bass and kind of taught myself, because I didn't know any teachers in Newcastle at the time.
That's interesting how those little things happen in your life that send you on a certain direction for almost ever. You know, like your sister saying, well, you need a bass player.
Yeah, it is bizarre. It is bizarre. But, you know, when you're young and you've got the time, do you know what I mean? You've got the time to just search things out. We're in the pre-computer age. We're in the do you know what I mean?
Yes.
I was one of those, I'm the generation that computers were brought into the high school, but they weren't taken seriously. You know what I mean? They were like, well, we don't really have enough computers for you to take computer class. Oh, okay. You know what I mean? So I was that transition kid where the start of the technological age, but not really embraced yet. You know what I mean? So we had oodles of time to practice, to, you know, do athletics, practice, after school school band, concert band, local bands, you name it, we were in them. Marching koalas.
The marching koalas. Huh?
Yeah.
Why is it that, I mean, this is not really a musical question so much, but you're talking about young people had more time pre-computers. What is that about?
Well, I don't know. It just seems like there's a lot more distractions now. Meaning that we didn't have the Facebook, we didn't have email back
Right.
then, for me, you know. I don't know. It's hard to say. You know, that's a hard question because I think certain kids are more disciplined than others. You know, really, these days, if you're going to get work done and really try to succeed at something, you've got to limit your time on Facebook. You've got to limit your time on email. You've got to, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas back then, there was none of that, and we weren't allowed to watch too much TV. And I wasn't as interested in TV as I was trying to work on a Schumann piano piece.
Mm.
You know?
Okay.
So, I don't know, for me, just, I sort of, I hid behind music a bit too. I grew up in a religious house,
Mm-hmm.
and all of that didn't really appeal to me too much, so music was a little bit of a way out for me,
Mm.
you know. So,
Okay.
I just notice with kids that I teach now, their time is so, you know what I mean, chopped up with it seems like there's a little more pressure on kids too now academically because we're in different economic times. You know what I mean? That there's a little more pressure on kids, I think,
Yeah.
these days.
Okay. Well, you were able to come to United States on a grant.
Yeah.
At that time, did you think, you know what, I think I could make a living at this? Did you come here with that idea, or
Well,
did
that's
it
a good
sort of
question.
evolve?
That's a good question because who knows when you come to a city like New York? I mean, you really have to know that once you not only immigrate to a new country, you know, where things are done slightly differently to Australia, you know, it's really, I like that expression, get in line. Look how many bass players have really made their mark in New York City, you know, and have for a long time, you know, have great reputations to go, you know. So it was really like, get to the back of the line, and, you know, unless you already, some people come to New York already knowing 20 people that are going to immediately, you know. But I actually just came with a bass in a suitcase, and I had a phone number in my book from Murray Wall, who was
Murray
from
Wall.
Melbourne.
Yeah.
Yep. And so, no, I didn't know if I was gonna, I really left Australia saying, I'm just going for the summer, New York summer, you know, American summer, or their winter. So I'm just going for a few months, I'll see you maybe October, November. It was very vague, totally scared the life out of my parents.
I'll bet.
Yeah, I was 24, and just brave, I guess. Crazy or brave, I don't know which one. But I don't know, I relished in the challenge. Soon after I met this Australian girl and I worked in fashion for 8 months. Because I really didn't know if I was ever going to get, you know, I had a gig with George Coleman Jr.'s mother, Gloria Coleman, who was a wonderful piano player. I think it paid like $30 or something, I forget what it was. It was like a lunchtime gig at the Angelica Film Centre. So I did Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I worked in fashion, selling prints to fashion designers. And that world was crazy. That was a crazy world, the whole fashion world. Skinny girls and gay guys. So pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much it was like, oh wow, this is something different.
Uh-huh.
You know, very competitive and but interesting in a kind of way. It was creative, you know. And so I did that for 8 months, you know, and sold all these prints, foulards, paisleys, whatever, to fashion designers, you know, prints on paper.
Oh.
Sales. It was hard work, you know, but it was my first job. So. So I did that for a while, and then on Thursday and Friday I did lunchtimes with George Coleman Jr. on drums and Gloria Coleman on piano at the Film Centre in New York, you know, and
This is George Coleman's son.
Yes,
Okay. I'll be
and
done.
his mother,
I see.
who passed away recently, actually,
I
in
see.
Philadelphia.
Uh-huh.
Wonderful piano player. But they kind of took me in, and it was just really a beautiful experience. I think I did that for like a year even, just playing there a couple of times a week, and it was like a way to just get your feet wet, you know what I mean? Just kind of,
Mhm.
it was a fun gig, you know. It was just for people having coffee before they went to the movie. I didn't care, you know what I mean? You just want to play and get out there, you know? And then at night, if I could afford it, I'd go to Bradley's. Remember Bradley's? And my teacher was Rufus Reed at the time.
Rufus Reed.
Yeah. So I'd go and see Rufus and, you know, all the piano players and trios that played at Bradley's. You know, I could walk there, you know. It was wonderful. It was a great time, you know.
And you're absorbing, just watching these people, how they play the gig and what they play, how they behave, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, pretty much. And then after 8 months, I had a gig in Switzerland, so I quit my day job. And that was early '95. And actually, they offered me a full-time job in fashion, actually, with commission and all. I could have actually gone down this whole other road in New York. Like actually being a musician in Sydney and then just gone to New York and then just like, whoop! I could have made money, I could have done, you know, it was kind of like almost too easy. Do you know what I mean? It was almost like, plus that's not my love. You know what I mean? I like nice clothes, who doesn't? But it's like, that's not a passion at all. But, so I said no thank you, and I just decided to try to figure it out.
Well, you have to be passionate about music to make a living out of it,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. You gotta love it. And I love the music community, you know. And the best musicians are just, you know, or most musicians are just really mostly good people to be around and hang out with. You know, best times of my life are times on the road. And the funniest times of my life have been times on the road, you know.
Like, can you pull one out of your memory?
Gee.
I know that's a hard question to just...
No, it is. It's
only
really
me.
hard to do that, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Because what happens with that, it's like saying an Australian expression.
Oh.
I have to be in the moment, or someone has to remind me of something to spur that on. And
Yeah.
it's hard to do that. It's hard. You know, there were really funny times watching Les Paul deal on the road. Now he's a real he's like 90 years old. He's going out to California. And just to watch him around celebrities and people that came to the gig, and just to see how he handled it. And then there was a problem with the money, and watching him just stand backstage and not go on stage. And I'm like, all right, whatever, you know. And people waiting for us and everything. There were times when I'm like, this is interesting. And then the boss came back and they sorted it all out and everything. All right, then we'll go back on. You know, you don't exactly know what happened, but you know it's all okay. Just stuff like that.
Yeah.
Just so many times we're like, wow.
I guess you can learn from all those things, but he seemed like he didn't suffer fools gladly.
Les, no. He was always good to me. Always good to me. You know, sometimes you get mad because I went on the road. I couldn't be there every Monday night over 10 years, you know what I mean? I was really trying to, I love going to Europe and playing, you know what I mean? I love going, you know, certain places. I just couldn't turn that down to stay in New York for Monday night and maybe some other gigs during the week, you know what I mean, that might turn up. But it was hard to make a living just on that Monday night, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, sometimes you're like, you know, but he usually said, we missed you. And sometimes that's all he'd say the whole night, you know what I mean? And if we had a really great show, he'd say, that was fun or something, that was good. And if it wasn't such a good show, or a show where he wasn't happy with his playing, he wouldn't say really anything. But it was never really negative, ever, towards me or the musicians. And he enjoyed it. He had a good time. And he laughed all the time. He was funny.
And now that gig, you have a series of different people who come in.
Yeah, it's the tribute to Les Paul night every Monday. So same as before, I'm there most Monday nights, but sometimes I'm not if I'm out on the road.
Is it your job to send in a sub?
Absolutely, Jay Lenhart subs for me.
Oh.
You know.
How funny is that?
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah. Well, they wanted someone that could also sing the odd tune.
Right.
And
Right.
Jay has
Music,
all that
okay.
wonderful repertoire of,
Right.
you know, comedic songs about
Right.
playing the bass.
Right.
essentially.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah. So
So are you a bass player who sings, or are you a singer who plays the bass?
I'm a bass player that sings.
Okay.
You know. I recently did a cabaret show where it was more about the singing. In fact, I was being directed by this director in this cabaret show who had me put down the bass and sit on a stool and sing some songs. And that to me was more about the singing. But if you think about the cabaret world, if someone's singing, that's what their focus is on.
Right.
Sometimes only just with a piano player. Do you know what I mean? The cabaret is where I think maybe cabaret is different from jazz. It's much more about the song and talking to the audience and connecting there, which was good discipline for me to have to do that, to that extreme. I sometimes think if I'm going to do a cabaret show, I still want to shift it more towards jazz.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? I still want to do instrumentals. I still want to, do you know what I mean? Keep the focus on some instrumental jazz, peppered with some nice tunes sung. You know? So for me, it's hard to do a whole cabaret show. You know?
Is there a thing about just feeling more exposed to the audience if it's just you and a microphone? I mean, when you have a bass, you've got this other thing.
Yeah, and I know, and I have had people say to me over the years, you should just really put the bass down. I'm like, I don't know, look at Esperanza Spalding, a good example. She's out there playing and singing, and she's really doing a whole lot of different stuff. I'm not caught up on her latest material, but she's doing it in her way. It's very interesting. But she's playing and singing, and I'm feeling now that the bass lines I'm playing, or the way I'm playing the bass, actually dictates how I sing. So I really don't. I have to separate the two when I'm in a studio, because they don't like the leakage and they don't like this and that, and they want. If you overdo your vocals, then they don't want the bass leaking into that and everything. So in the studio, so far, I've done everything separate.
Oh.
Not really by choice, it's just because the engineers want to do it that way. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Or the producer, I've done 4 Japanese records and they've all been done that way. And they're all vocals on every track. So it's a lot of work. It's okay, because then there's a discipline of doing a couple of takes vocally until you're really in the moment, you're really in the song, So, but I prefer live where you sing and you play at the same time.
How much time do you get? Like with these, you're on a lot of the Arbor's recordings now.
Yeah.
And how much time do you typically get? It's a long question, but how many hours do those LPs do those CDs actually take? And do you know what's coming before you get there?
Good question. Okay, assuming I'm not the leader.
Yeah.
I have no clue what's coming until I get there. So the session usually is booked for 2 4-hour days, 12 to 4 on a Monday, 12 to 4 on a Tuesday. They're usually consecutive days. And so you turn up at near 12, and you might get a bunch of tunes in your hand. You might get a tune per song. You know what I mean? Like, we're doing this song, here's the music. Do that song, here's the next song, either you'll know it or they'll give you a chart. You know what I mean? If they've got a specific arrangement, they'll always put a chart.
Yeah.
So if I'm not the leader, I have no clue what we're doing. If I'm the leader, and I think the musicians don't need to know till they get there. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm working. You're working with such wonderful players like Warren Bechet and Harry Allen. They can read and play through anything. You don't really have to. Worry about it. You know what I mean? You just turn up and you get to rehearse it. If it's hard, you rehearse it. But then if I'm leading myself and I want to sing some, then you do 2 days of instrumental, and then usually come back on another day and finish off the vocals or something.
Okay. How much control do you get over? I mean, you have a producer who's, in a sense, paying for the session.
Matt Domba?
Yeah.
It depends who the producer is.
Who says, well, I like take 1, and He likes take two.
Matt is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Matt is very cool.
Yeah.
He's so laid back. He's like, oh, it all sounds good to me. He's pretty much that.
Yeah.
You know what
Okay.
I mean? But sometimes he really has an opinion about it. He's like, well, that sound, I like that. Nah, the other one's better. Sometimes he will actually say, you know, what he likes. It's generally up to the band leader on those sessions. You know? So often I'm hearing back a bass solo, I'm like, I hope they don't pick this track. But if they pick that track and I'm not the leader, I have to live, you know,
Mhm.
because we're on a time thing, so if the gig, if you're not the leader on the session, you can't be tying up people's time. Like, I'm going to do that bass solo over again. I didn't like it. You know, you can't be tying up people's time that way.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You have
Yeah.
to be respectful. It's their record. If they're happy with it, or if they didn't like it, they could say to you, why don't you run the first 4 bars of that? It didn't sound so great. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
the other thing I'm doing a session, because I do love recording and I love doing it. I love getting through, you know, I don't like wasting time. I don't like too much talking time or eating time, or, you know, I like to, like, let's get through it, you know, because you do get in a roll.
Mhm.
When you're doing a take, I find that you really have to be aware of, because these are tiny, you know, 4 hours and 4 hours. Well, rock records get done in 6 months. You know what I mean? It's like you really have to be aware of, if you make a mistake or you don't make the right changes at a point, or you miss the ending, or you didn't even make the beginning, you have to make a mental note as you go through the take. And you can say, at the end of the take, I need to overdub bars 16 and 17. You know what I mean? Because they may not be hearing, or someone's talking and they don't hear it.
Mhm.
Then they get the product and they go home and say, oh, what happened to Nicki there? Oh, she missed that bit. You know, but if you make a mental note, you can say, listen, I need to overdub these bars because I know I was nowhere near it, you know.
Wow.
You know, so
Yeah.
that's another good thing in the studio, I think, is to be aware at all times of, you know, because that might be the take they pick.
And they can actually punch you in for
Exactly.
a couple bars. And
Modern recording, it's
Yeah.
incredible.
it's incredible.
I have to thank Les for that, multi-track recording.
Yeah.
So it's fast, it's easy, I'm working with engineers like Jimmy Zach up at NOLA, where others do most of all their New York recording. It's quick as hell.
Boy, that place has
And
been there
often
for
Jimmy
a
will hear it. Jimmy's like, Nicki, play the ending again. Wasn't clean. You're right. Bam. Usually takes like,
Wow.
not even 2 minutes.
Hmm.
It's amazingly fast now.
That place has been there a long time.
A long time.
I remember guys that played in the 30s talk, I think, maybe not that old, but
Mm.
must be neat to be in that kind of place like Milt Hinton
I
played
love
here.
it. It's
Yeah.
just a good energy.
Yeah.
It's a great energy up there. You know, it's always a nice vibe. You know, it's funny. It's not too serious. Sometimes it gets serious if someone's not happy with the music or the musicians or something. But rarely. It's generally a good time. People pop in all the time. It's a great atmosphere.
How do you learn all the tunes that you need to know as a bass player?
Mm.
And you must have to tell your students something about that.
Well, it's funny, isn't it? Sometimes you think there's 2 schools of thought in jazz. Bucky Pizzarelli, when he was at William Patterson, boy, I mean, I know that because I knew as someone that studied with him, he really got on kids' cases. I think Bucky can do it and get away with it. He's so he's just so wonderful. He'd get on kids' cases about learning tunes and having repertoire. I'm not sure if that's always really the focus in schools. You know what I mean? I'm not sure about that. You know, there was a set repertoire that I had to learn when I was back at the conservatorium, and it was like I don't know, 25 tunes a year. I was only there for 2 years.
Did
The
that
Sydney Conservatorium.
did that education prepare you very well for the real world?
It's a good question, isn't it? So much of jazz, I think, is really taught on the bandstand in a way.
Mhm.
I'd say yes and no in a way. I had good teachers at the conservatorium. I had great teachers. And you know what? You're playing all the time. You are playing tunes. I was playing tunes back then, that still get played on gigs today. I met some wonderful people. Mike Knock, great piano player who was in New York,
Oh, yeah.
was my one of my ensemble teachers. Don Burrows, Australian jazz legend,
What was
ran
his
the
name?
whole. Don Burrows.
Okay.
He's an Australian. He's a legend there. He's just a great musician, great guy. He started this jazz course at the Sydney Conservatorium. And I was the first girl student of my bass teacher, which was funny.
Yeah.
And he was great. He's a great bass player. I don't know. There's different ways of, sometimes, yes, sometimes I thought the classes were a waste of time. But I was there with my friends, my sister, and there were 5 of us from Newcastle that went to the Sydney Con at the same time. We all moved to Sydney. Some of us shared a house, and we're at the Sydney Con. And all 5 of us are now professional musicians in different parts of the world. My sister and I are in New York. Adrian Mears is one of the best trombone players living in Germany. Andrew Dickerson's a fine drummer, always busy in Sydney. And then John Foreman was he was the only one that didn't go with us to the Sydney Con because he was too young. But we had this little group, we had this band together. And he was like 13 at the time, he couldn't even reach the pedals on the piano. He became the Paul Schaefer of Australia. I mean, he had the big MD gig on music shows. He wrote the theme for the Australian Olympics. He's like the MD for Australian Idol. He's like, you know what I mean? Like he's like a household name in Australian music. I just thought that was really wonderful that the 5 of us, from just going to jazz camp together and playing music together as late teenagers, actually went to the con and do it as a career. I don't know what the question was.
Well, I'm trying to envision you going to one of your many gigs that are not throw together is not the right word, but it's not a working band, and someone calls a tune and you don't know it.
Happens a lot. Happens a lot to me.
So what do? Do you say, can we not play that? I mean,
no, I can't do that. I'm the bass,
I know, you're the bass player.
Right, I cannot. It happens a lot, especially on gigs where, you haven't played with this person really ever, you know what I mean? But now they're leading a set and they're assuming maybe you know this song, but it's really obscure to me, very obscure.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you've been doing this, like I have professionally for 22 years now, and know quite a few songs, I still get stumped. There might be 1 or 2 songs in a set I'm like, when was that written? 1910? I mean, really, God, So, with these crazy titles, and you're like, well, sometimes if it's a complicated tune, I ask him, is it easy or hard? If it's easy, my ears will guide me. If the piano player is playing a dominant, I know where that's going to. You know what I mean? If
you hope.
Yeah.
You hope, unless it's sort of deceptive.
If it's really hard to melodic keys, I say, can you write it out for me? If I don't get a chance to, then I've just got to help make this open. And sometimes if I'm really not getting it, I'll be like looking at him like, what is it?
Mm-hmm.
That's just one of the hardest things about being in the rhythm section.
Really?
Because often the piano players will get to say if it's too hard. The piano players are very vocal about that. Oh, I really don't know it.
Okay.
Piano players don't want to be shown up not knowing chords to a song. So, but then again, if they do and you don't know it, well then you've got to rely on them to teach it to you. Generally by the second chorus or third, generally after the head, hopefully you have it.
Okay.
If it's not the most difficult tune in the world. If it's Waltz for Debbie and you've never played it, then you need a chart. I'm sorry, but you can't really expect musicians to play a very difficult song that they haven't heard before. That's hard work.
Yeah. And it doesn't, as far as the leader, it doesn't serve the leader well either. Like, I'm going to make you play it. Well, okay, but what you're going to get, you're not going to be that happy with. It's only going to reflect on you too.
Yeah, you get to the bridge and you may not have any chords underneath you. because they thought they knew the tune, and then they get to the bridge and they start playing the bridge of another tune, and you're, good luck, it happens.
Yeah. And sometimes the piano player's waiting for you to hit the
Exactly.
note.
And I've guided just as many piano players, I've guided piano players and guitar players through tunes too,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? And it's just that thing where we just go, okay, we're here to learn. Music is about learning,
Yeah.
And sometimes in those situations you go home with like, I like that song we played, what was that called again? Do you know what I mean? You
Yeah.
actually go home with a new song that you might seek out, or you might
Okay.
play again.
Yeah.
And now you've learned it on that gig. And that's how it works for me, generally.
Well, I've seen you play a bunch of times now, and I was thinking to myself, I can't imagine why a band leader wouldn't want you in their
Oh,
band.
that's so sweet.
I'm also wondering, is there, I'm trying to think how to phrase this question. Do you have to be careful of sending the spotlight towards you? I mean,
There is a lot of times, and a lot of singers, in fact most singers, that don't want me on the bandstand with them. And it's nothing about music. They don't want any attention away from what they're doing, from themselves. So having another woman on stage, some would feel as a distraction to them. God forbid if it's an older woman. It's just the way it is. So there are a few exceptions to that. I think Anne Hampton Calloway is one of the coolest women I work with. She doesn't care. She's so good at what she does. She's so confident. She's great. So there are the exceptions to the rule. Most singers aren't that way.
Mhm.
So I generally do not work with other singers. And I can only put it down to that fact. It's like, why have another woman on stage if I can have XYZ of guy bass players
Yeah.
that won't take attention away from, not that I'm trying to. If the gig is just me accompanying, I'm just in the background doing my work,
Right.
But it's just the way it's perceived from an audience point of view, whatever. But, so there's that situation. And really, I'm just happy to play with good people, There's also a lot of people that just wouldn't hire a girl musician for whatever reason. Still.
Still.
Still. Yeah, it happens. And it's just, does it happen less? I'm sure it happens less. But does it still happen? Yeah. It doesn't bother me. I still work.
Mhm.
I still travel. Maybe I don't want to work with them. So,
Yeah.
do you know what I mean? It's like, I don't really care so much about the politics anymore as long as I'm playing with good people.
Mhm.
And as long as I have respect for musicians that I admire, then really who cares in the end?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like if you start worrying about the gigs you're not doing, you can get really dark and bitter quickly.
Yeah. Well, it's like referring to Marion McPartland as one of the best of the women jazz musicians.
Yeah, and still today,
Yeah.
certain clubs, and remain nameless, but trying to get a real gig there is, you might get a night on a Women in Jazz week. And it's kind of like, wow, we still have those? I guess we do. And Billy Taylor has a wonderful Women in Jazz festival at the Kennedy Center.
Mhm.
But he's doing it for the right reason. He's doing it because he wants to highlight women leaders more. So it's not only women playing,
Yeah.
And of course I'm friends with everybody in Diva, and there's a lot of wonderful musicians in Diva, where I started,
Yeah.
in the Diva Big Band. My sister plays in Diva, and it's a great band, and I like everybody in the band. But there's still issues around it, which
Well,
I try not to take too much time with.
Do you think it would get to the point where the Diva Big Band could just be the something else big band? I mean, the title
Sure,
of the band calls attention to the fact
sure,
that this is an all-women
Yeah.
band.
yeah. Well, I guess that gets into the marketing thing. I mean, I don't think you would want to, I think it's hard enough for a big band to get work.
Yeah.
In fact, my sister leaves today to go on a jazz cruise with Diva,
Oh.
actually. must call her. Anyway, I think if you've been around for 10 years and you get gigs with the name Diva and it's working for you, why
Yeah.
change it?
Right.
You know, it's hard enough to, with a name change, you know what I mean, try and get gigs, you know, and I think it works for them. You know, they are kind of a diva-ish kind of band, you know what I mean? They're really kind of, they're a power, you know, they really suck it to you, you know, they're really
Okay.
fully charged band, I think, you know, good
Yeah,
players.
good.
You know.
So the name does have some significance behind it, because the
Yeah, I
word
think they
diva
like to-
is used a lot these days.
Yeah, and it's overused. And
Right.
It's,
Yeah.
it's usually in reference to a woman that thinks she's all that or whatever. You know, whatever.
She's
I don't
all
know.
that,
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think in this instance, it's just, I don't know. I think it's fine for the band, you know. And they sound good.
Is there a double standard for the way a woman musician has to try to look on a gig as opposed to guys? I mean, guys can. I don't know if guys think that much about
No, they
what
don't.
they wear.
Yeah, sometimes it's really obvious with musicians that you really put no thought. In fact, that shirt and that tie, really, you know. I don't mean to be mean, and it's not about fashion, you know, playing music, but it is about looking presentable,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and it's good to definitely look presentable. Getting back to your point, getting back to the question again. Sorry,
I
I'm
just
brain-dead.
wondered if you feel like you have to pay more attention to how you dress.
You know, I
and-
used to try to dress way more like a guy when I was first starting out in music. Oh yeah. I was so conscious of not being taken seriously, and there was one instance when I got called for a gig. I was like, "Is this Nicki Parrott?" And I said, "Well, actually, it's Nicki, and it's a bass player." Yeah, Nicki Parrott. Click. You know what I mean? So there was like an instance when I was like really fragile. I was still trying to learn how to play, and I was 18 or 19, and I noticed the guys I grew up with in Newcastle were getting all these great gigs, and I was like, first time I was aware, oh God, I'm a woman in this business. You know what I mean? It was like the first time I'd really become aware of, well, maybe it's going to be different for me to them, you know, in a way, or subtle differences. But, you know, I've been one of the lucky ones though. I've been a professional musician, like I said, for basically 22 years with an 8-month stint in fashion. These days it doesn't matter, you know, it doesn't matter woman, man, black, white, anything. It's just a more difficult time to be a musician and make a living. So it doesn't really, all of that stuff has gone to the wayside because economically it's a challenge whoever you are. It doesn't matter anymore.
Okay.
That's how I feel now. I feel like it's much more on a, pretty much an even playing field, you know what I mean? Where there are gigs to be had and you have to work very hard at getting them, it seems.
Have you noticed that it's gotten harder in your 22 years?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes, because even when I first came here and I was doing gigs on Broadway, there was still a little bit of a studio scene in New York. There was still things going on. Actually, I think that time in New York was really great. I got hooked up with the whole corporate party scene at the end of '94, and I got sponsored by this club day organization, you know, sponsored for an O1 visa. So I was actually able to get legal. It'd be much harder to do what I did then now.
Mm.
It's a different time with a post 9/11 world.
Yeah.
And politics are much different now. And, you know, it was a much easier time then in a way. Just, you know, there were all these gigs and corporate and, you know, and so I got sponsored for an O1 visa, which allowed me to be legal.
O1?
O1 artist visa for 3 years.
Okay.
So I had a sponsor and I worked with her on and off for the next few years and started paying taxes and got a social security card. So within 6 months of being here, I was a legal resident.
Are you a citizen now?
No, I'm not. In fact, this week I have to go and renew a green card.
No.
and then citizenship. I want
I
to be a
see.
citizenship by this time next year, so
I
I'll let
see.
you know if I
Okay.
cross that hurdle. It's a lot of paperwork, and the hardest question for me, there's 2 questions on the citizenship paper that are very hard for a musician. Name all your employers in the last 5 years. Name everywhere you've been since a green card. So probably,
Oh my.
if not 5 years, up to 10 years of where have you been outside the country. Well, I did so many one-nighters, I don't even remember. I've got 2 passports to go through. You know, it's like, wow.
Wow.
So there's a couple of questions that aren't really geared for us. All they really want to know were you in the Middle East a lot? That's what they want to know. But they have to know exactly where you've been. Maybe you're in Pakistan. Maybe you're in places that are on the watch, you know? So it's very hard. The process is going to take me a lot of time to go through.
Yeah. Wow.
Daunting for someone who's
I
not
guess.
tip-top organized.
I mean, do you save your calendars from year to
Yeah,
year?
I've got my calendar
Yeah.
saved.
Yeah.
But sometimes I would write, literally when I was doing a lot of traveling, Europe, back from Europe. And that would be like a 3-month, what did I do in those 3 weeks? Honestly, I didn't even know what country I was in sometimes. If I'm going from Warsaw to Czechoslovakia to, you know, I may not even written that, I might have been asleep the whole time and not written it in my book, you know?
Oh, that's
So,
funny. I just was talking to another musician about that fact, like, the people think your travel's so great because you get to go all these places.
it is, it's one of the perks. I
Okay.
never forget that. When I meet people that haven't been out of their country, I'm like, oh, and you're 10 years older than me and you haven't really, you've been once to Europe and you're like, oh, you gotta go back. And you gotta go this place and you gotta, I feel for them in a way. You know what I mean? No, there's so many beautiful places to go in America, of course. It's a wonderful place to be, of course. But you need a comparison point. And every time I go back to Europe and come back, I have a different perspective. I cook differently. I live a little differently. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then I, you know, have a different perspective on. I'm more of an outsider looking in. You know, and I don't know. I just feel it's one big perk. Really, it is. It's hard work, but it's still a perk.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
In the really small sense, though, sometimes I wonder how. I envision you and drummers especially playing a club date in New York,
Yeah.
and logistically, I would think that's probably a pain sometimes, like
Ooh.
parking your car.
You can
getting-
say that. I don't know how many gigs I've done in Midtown where you really have to call someone. I need help. Sometimes I have to take a PA, particularly if they want me to sing and play the whole night. So you've got a PA, an acoustic bass, an amplifier, and the gig's upstairs at the Crown Plaza on 42nd Street. How do you do this? Except put your hazards on, panic, get help, get your stuff inside, make sure someone's watching it, go and park. It's a nightmare. But you find a way. The best thing about you really have to be organized. You know what I mean? The more organization, the more time you give yourself. You know, the better off you'll be,
Mhm.
you know. And you have to go and do your own research. Sometimes I go to bestparking.com and print out a coupon to get cheaper parking somewhere, you know. And you have to know do the streets go this way on that street, or do they go, you really have to know Midtown Manhattan to survive it.
Oh.
Yeah, it's rough.
Yeah.
That's the hardest part. To me, it's not about playing and singing. That's the, you know, smiling, you know, on those gigs, corporate gigs. All you do is turn up, play, sing, smile, and that's really all the gig requires, you know, your background music, you know. But the other stuff, wow, that's a challenge.
What does a gig like that pay, if you don't mind me asking?
Varies.
Uh-huh.
Well, it's as low as 300, really, or sometimes even a little lower. But that's usually if I don't sing or do anything else, you know, it could be lower. But, you know, maybe 300 to 5, 6, even more,
Mhm.
you know. Generally not more these days.
Yeah. Well, around here, people would be very happy with that.
Yeah, no, really, yeah, absolutely.
It's very. I'm sure it's different. But people who go to plays like in Smalls,
Yeah,
what do those gigs pay, or do they?
I don't really do any gigs under $100,
Uh-huh.
and there are a lot of $100 gigs that have stayed $100 for a very long time.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So the
Yeah.
pay hasn't gone up in New York
I see.
in a very long time. You could go as low as, oh my goodness, my sister did a big band gig the other night, $15. I'm like,
Oh.
I'm like, that's one drink and a tea at Paz. Come on. In New York these days.
Yeah.
Woo.
Yeah.
She makes money in other ways. She's one of the best copyists there is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, she does other gigs that actually do pay some money. So,
Right.
you know, you kind of weigh everything up. Sometimes, some gigs, I did a $100 gig the other night in Midtown. And I had a ball. I was with, you know, a Lincoln Center drummer, you know, works with Winton and everybody, you know. He was happy to play for $100. You know? We were all saying how much phone calls the next day. That was great last night. You know what I mean? It was like,
Yeah.
that's the most fun I've had on a gig in ages, you know, in a while. You know what I mean? So, for me, it was $100, but it wasn't about the $100.
Mm-hmm.
You know, club owners know this too, that we want to play music, you know,
Yeah.
and often take advantage of this fact. I just have a bit of a problem with some of the kids coming out of the colleges and playing for $20, $30 and $50 even, you know, and it's really just not helping a standardized anything, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So playing for nothing is not a great idea, generally.
Yeah.
But we want to play.
Let me. I'm watching the time here, but just wanted to toss a couple of names at you. We were talking about Kenny DeVerne
Yeah.
earlier, and
Yeah.
he's the guy who first gave me your name.
You're kidding.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm so
because we were
grateful.
talking about who to bring up and to Hamilton. And
Oh, I never got here with Kenny, did I?
I don't think so.
No, what a shame.
Yeah,
We did a lot of gigs though,
yeah,
before he passed.
yeah.
You know, I was subbing for, I'm trying to remember the name of the bass player, but he played with all the time. Memory today. Greg
Cohen.
Greg Cohen.
Yeah.
And so between me and Greg, we did most of Kenny's gigs
Yeah.
the last couple of years, 2 or 3 years. I love playing with him. I like the fact that he had a different approach to playing that music completely. In other words, he liked the openness. I love the way James Cirillo played with him, because I felt like there was a lot of space. And I love space in music, and I don't feel sometimes there's enough of it, you know what I mean? It gets a little crowded there, you know? And I never felt that way on Kenny's gigs. I felt there was so much. Kenny never wasted notes.
Mm-hmm.
He had one of the best sounds I've ever heard on clarinet, for a start.
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted you to play. He didn't want you to take short solos, or he just, you know, he encouraged you to play long solos sometimes, you know. And I learned a lot, you know. Sometimes it wasn't feeling right, he'd turn around and say something, you know what I mean, and scare the hell out of you. But, you know, but it was all out of encouragement and just like really, he always, you know, just was on your side.
He
all the
wanted
time.
it to be good. You know,
He wanted it to be really good. He had
Yeah.
high standards. He really did, you know. And often it was because he believed in you that he would say something in the first place. And I appreciated that. I found that sometimes when I was growing up, this gets back to the women thing. I think sometimes guys are really scared to say something to a woman musician that they might say to a guy. And I'm like, no, I'm one of the guys. I've been one of the guys for 22 years on the road. You know, you can't shock me, you know. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I've always wanted just to be treated like one of the guys.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me if I'm rushing or slowing down. Just tell me, you know. I might get a little upset, maybe back in the hotel room later, but I'm not going to show. I'm going to listen to you, and I'm going to say, yeah, you're right. Okay, good. You know, maybe I wasn't aware of that. I thought I was you know, not slowing down. But thank you, you know what I mean? Because how else do you grow as a musician? Particularly someone like Kenny's that has had the experience and played with really great bass players. Milt Hinson a lot, you know. Then tell me, because I'm younger and maybe I just don't know.
That was the next guy I was going to ask about. Were you able to rub elbows with Milt Hinton?
That's all I was able to really do, because when I started going to Abba's jazz parties and started to see him play, he was already in a wheelchair.
Oh yeah.
I remember one quick story. You got time for it?
I do.
Yeah. There was an Abba's jazz party almost a decade ago, maybe 9 years ago, maybe 10 years ago now. And it was when I first started doing the Abba's jazz party, when Matt first started inviting me to play with whoever. You know, not to play with Diva or and the five player and the other bands, but actually put me with whoever, you know, which was really brave of him and just so wonderful of him to embrace me that way, you know. And so we had one set, and Michael Moore was leading the set. And this was a stellar cast of bass players. I was petrified. It was Jay, Michael Moore, I think Phil Flanagan. Milt wasn't there. This was a set for Milt. And it was a 20-minute set that Matt had allotted on a Sunday at the jazz party. Sorry, I haven't gone through all the bass players there. I'll get back to it. Keita Betts was there. I might be forgetting a couple, I hope not, but there was a lot of bass players. In those days we all had a bass because it was before the airlines really, you know, started to come down. But I think we all had a bass. And, you know, Michael said, well, they've allotted 20 minutes. He said, but I don't know if you've seen Milt. I don't know how long Milt's going to be around, if we'll ever get to do this for him again. So we're going to take as long as it takes to do our tribute to Milt Hinton. It may not be 20 minutes, but we're going to take as long as it takes. And I was like, right on, Michael. You can do that. You've been here a lot. You've known Milt for years. It was so moving. It's the most moving, even thinking about it, I get emotional, because it was the most moving, probably hour set. Well, like, it probably ended up being more like an hour set, come to think of it, because what we did 2 or 3 duets. Michael had these 2-part, he did an album with Rufus Reid, so he had a 2-part bass thing that he had in his book, which was, you know, melody and harmony and bass line and all that. So we all split up, rehearsed in the morning, remember that, and we all took a part and played on stage 2 or 3 pieces. And then we all did personal tributes with Milt on stage. So you know, and this is when you got to have something up your sleeve. There's all these people on stage. You know, Jay's got his wonderful song about whatever, you know, impossible to sing, but whatever he was doing. Jay's got a song. Phil was doing some kind of bebop thing, you know, and all these people, and everyone had something great. Well, I had worked out, you know, I think it's good to work out stuff sometimes. I worked out kind of a big introduction on Man I Love, you know what I mean, with double stops and everything, completely worked out. There's nothing wrong with that when you've got to like be front and center. Do you know what I mean? So I had worked out something on Man I Love, and Milt, I heard him actually, Milt turned to Jay and said, "We gotta get rid of the girl, she'll steal our gigs." So that was like,
wow.
So that was the most fun I ever had on the jazz parties, just because we were all on the same page and we were all driven, and it was a standing ovation. It was like one of those, like you can't, you know what I mean? It's like trying to, you know, if a promoter came and said we're going to do this, and it might not have come off so eloquent and so natural. Do you know what I mean? It was bass players doing their tribute the way they wanted to do it, you know, and it was so wonderful.
Wow.
So that's my memory of Milt. It was like seeing him towards the end. And at the end of our set, he got up and sang Old Man Time.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
The way he does it,
Yeah. And it was so moving.
You know, everybody who met the guy had these memories. He fell asleep on my shoulder once. That's my memory. And
really?
Yeah. I mean, we were in a van going with the Statesmen of Jazz, and I was
really?
I was riding with them. And he fell asleep on my shoulder going, Bill Tinton is. But I just, some of those people have this magnetism to them that, like,
I think so.
you feel better after you've been able to just be near them.
I think so too.
It was like really.
I think that's why we do this. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Do you know what I mean? For
Yeah.
those moments,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? And that, they don't come around every day. A lot of the time, your gigs are just okay. It was okay, so and so didn't sound so great. It's okay,
Yeah.
Or or most of the time, I'm playing with people they're good gigs. I'm very fortunate, But those gigs are like, wow, they're the ones that stand out in your brain. Where they're like, am I lucky to be, pinch me, am I here?
Yeah.
They're the ones that are special.
Well, I'm very glad that the day that you had the conflict with the piano exam and the race,
And the 200
that
meters, I think it was.
that you chose the piano exam, because
Yes.
if you think about it, for one thing, your career as a sprinter would probably be over by now.
There's that. You have to be so good. I mean, to just get in, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. I enjoy it. In fact, I still want to run fast sometimes. You know what I mean? Like I'll be doing a jog, I'm like, let me see if I still got it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that also was about freedom, about expressing myself and about freedom. When I was running, I felt free of the world. You know what I mean? It was a similar thing that I was searching for.
Mm.
You know what I mean? I was just trying to get it through two different ways. Music gave me the out of being able to disconnect for a minute from reality and church and school and bullies and all the stuff you go through as kids. That's why they gotta make more importance of music and art in school, because it's really, kids need to escape in a productive way. It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. And running was also, I know sports gets a lot of attention, but kids need to be active. They need to have healthy lives, and I think when you're a kid, you're less inclined to get fat when you're
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Because you want to be fit,
You have any long-term goals? Any?
There's places I want to play and people I want to play with. I focus on them at different times. Like, this is a quieter month for me, so I'll explore that again. You know what I mean? I send some. You got to be prepared when you're in this business for the rejection too. I might want to play at this place, but they might be ready to have me or want me at that place.
Mm-hmm.
So for whatever reason too, there could be a million different reasons. So you may not even get an email back, but you still keep trying. You got to keep trying. So there's a lot of stuff I still want to do. A lot of projects I'd still like to do.
Mm-hmm. Write more songs. You've written
Right,
some
I
nice
gotta write
tunes.
more.
Yeah.
I gotta write more. I have to.
I like that one you wrote. I think you're the one I've been.
You're the one oh goodness, wow. You're the one I think I've waited
Yes.
for or something.
I like the I think in that title.
It's a little complex.
Yeah. Is it hard to with all the traveling and so forth, and the way your life is, it hard to have establish relationships?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think every musician's going to say yes to this.
Yeah.
If they say, no, not really, then they just got really lucky. I mean, really. Because, and you see the wonderful relationships. You and I are at a dinner table with Bucky and Ruth.
Yeah.
And it's like, you just take your hat off to them. You know what I mean? Here they are together, having a good time together. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
It's so wonderful to see, but it's also so rare.
Yeah.
So yes, right now I'm single. I was married, but I have a wonderful guy in my life, so I would definitely try that out again. It's very hard. It's been really hard the last few years. Just all my whole life actually, to understand that I'm a musician. I travel. I'm a little ambitious, and I really, this is my life. And I mean, I have had boyfriends literally say, well, you can't go away this much. I'm like, well, not only is it economic too, the reason I'm going, I gotta, living in New York ain't cheap, living by yourself, so, so
You have to go where the work is.
Well, that's where the work is, and often, I'm going out of town to play with some people I really like playing with.
Mhm.
I'm gonna have fun. If I stay in town waiting for the phone to call for the local gigs, I might be not doing something as great, you know what I mean? Anyway, so it is hard. And so now I'm in a relationship that I really want to, interview me in 10 years.
Okay.
No, but that I really want to see through marriage and everything else. I really want all that.
Yeah.
It's just really hard to have as a musician,
Right.
I think.
Well, I appreciate your time today. It's been very enjoyable.
Very enjoyable for me. Good questions.
And
Challenging questions.
good luck with the klezmer tonight and the
Yeah,
whole thing. And
yeah. I'm sure it'll be great. He's always great. One thing about David, he puts on a great show. You know, and he's just a hell of a player. So, sorry you won't be there, but that's okay.
Yeah. Well, we're expecting you at Hamilton again next fall. So.
Which is lovely. Thank you for asking me.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
good luck to you.
Thank you.
All righty.
Thanks, Mark. Much appreciated.